Oh, okay. What up, though? It's your boy Keith. How you living? Boom, boom. Oh, that camera looks good, bruh.
Hello to niggas and niggas only. This is your boy Keith, Marquise Davon, this American Negro, whatever you want to call me, just don't ever call me Mark. Okay? So today we are going to talk about more white nonsense, particularly the one that goes by Kyle Rittenhouse and how he is launching his new initiative to combat the lies told by the media called the Media Accountability Project, the MAP. But before we get into that nonsense, if you want to support me financially, you can become a patron at patreon.com/marquisedavon. Once again, that's patreon.com/marquisedavon, MarquiseDavon. You can also check in the description box below. You can go and support me for as little as $2 a month, which is $24 a year, or above that, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. You'll get some exclusive content there first and foremost, and also discounts and the immediate news on any new merch coming or any events that are going to be coming out in the future. So please make sure you go and support me there. Now, let's get into this topic because I think it's fascinating that we are now in a space where a Kyle Rittenhouse has become a celebrity. And it's not the first time that violent white people have become celebrities. And if you don't know who Kyle Rittenhouse is, he is the boy, man, whatever we want to call him, who decided to go to a BLM protest and protect some property. But while he was protecting that property, he ended up also killing 2 people, injuring 1. But he did it all in the name of self-defense. Earlier this year, or just before the new year happened, he was also acquitted and he was not found guilty on any accounts of murder because he had an alibi. He was at least a white person who had reason to do what he did. So it wasn't like the optics showed him being racist. You couldn't necessarily fight him on that from a court standpoint. Now, I think he is a wholehearted racist. That is just my opinion. But, you know, he's coming after me now. So let me use alleged. He's an alleged white supremacist. He's an alleged racist. But really, I genuinely don't give a fuck about that kind of stuff. But I'm particularly annoyed by this because his initiative is to hold the media accountable in terms of what they reported on. And yes, do we have an odd relationship with the media? And did they fall into a hole that didn't actually feel good? Absolutely. That is something to talk about. There's something more that we should be interrogating when it comes to the media and what their role looks like today, because there is a definite mistrust in the media. But we also have to be super honest on what we saw on video and the motivation of him crossing state lines and what he was really there to do. I think right now he can use the excuse like, oh, I'm the victim, I've done this, and I was really just trying to protect them. They can't call me a racist or a white supremacist because there's no proof. So I'm going to come after Sank from the Young Turks. I'm going to go after Whoopi Goldberg and sue her and sue other media companies. Because to be honest, in that interview that he did on Fox News with Tucker Carlson, it was really just giving he's a mouthpiece. And I don't do that to take away any of his own agency, because he's an 18-year-old man who killed 2 people and he got away with it, right? But I can also understand how people are able to position him in a space of, we need to have our win. White people have been looking for their win since George Floyd. White people have been still trying to find this way to rehabilitate their image, because what we saw was the pure violence of what whiteness was. And so when I'm looking at Kyle Rittenhouse and his rise to celebrity and people humanizing him and the way that the media and overall he's trying to position himself, he's positioning himself as a victim. He's positioning himself as a sympathetic character. He's positioning, not character, he's a real human, a sympathetic person. And because he's garnering that sympathy, because he was not technically an adult where he was at, there is still space to say, well, he has time to grow. He has time to develop into a better person. He has time to have his road to redemption, to redeem himself. He has this time. And it doesn't help that the optics don't even look like we can really prove that, because remember, his people that he killed were not black. And because of his victims not necessarily being black, it didn't register to a lot of people. But because his motivation was to go to a Black Lives Matter protest, wow, I said words. The fact that he went to a Black Lives Matter protest, a lot of this really threw people. And to me, I'm just like, it's wild that it can take who the victims were. Not really wild, we know. It takes who the victims were to really justify, like, if he's a white supremacist or not. But if we also look at history, oftentimes white folks who were also in alignment with black people were also being killed, ostracized, or we looked at them a lot differently. Not we, as in us, black people, but the white community definitely was just like, ooh, nah, you not aligned with us, white is right, and you not on the right side, you gotta go, right? We've seen this happen countless and countless times. The white bus driver who allowed black people to do whatever they needed to do on the bus, that shit got caught on fire. They murdered these people, right? And so there is still that history of, even when whiteness tries to align itself with blackness, or white people try to align themselves with the black community and our plight, I think this is also a space where he kind of reinforced that, because the government said, we don't care about these white people that he killed. Fuck. Right? That's wild. But that's just how the game goes. And it's interesting that we're seeing him start this initiative, because we're also looking at somebody like Kim Potter, who only received a 2-year sentence. For her to only receive a 2-year sentence after killing Daunte Wright, which came right after the George Floyd trial and his death, it is really wild to see that we are about to enter a space of racial tension overall again. And there was a little bit where it felt like, from the public imagination, that a lot of this stuff went down. People are still fighting every day, let's be very clear. Protests are still happening every single day, let's be very clear. Black people are still fighting for justice. But there was a sense of real life that we wanted to get back to, a sense of ignorance and bliss and escapism that we wanted to get to. And because of all of that, there was just this little period of time where we were just like, cool, this doesn't have to be the hot topic of conversation anymore. We don't have to have media that reflects this. We don't want to see this thing anymore, because we know how our reality is shaped for us. But to me, it's interesting that we're seeing the thing with Kim Potter. We're also witnessing this situation with critical race theory. People are going actively against critical race theory because at least Kyle Rittenhouse, because he is able to redeem himself, critical race theory does not redeem white people. It does not. It holds white people accountable. It holds them to their ugly history. It holds them to their families. It holds them to, this is what happened and how we got to where we got. And they are not doing well with that. They're not. And so them not doing well with that is why they want to attack all of this stuff. It's why they want to fire back. It's why they want to have their wins back in the public imagination. That's why they need to uplift something like a Rittenhouse, because at least that is a white boy who can still feign innocence. We can still fight for that. We can still redeem that. You must be a demon if you want to demonize a child for what he did in the name of quote unquote self-defense. He's acquitted, so it must be true. Now, we know some people who was acquitted and they did what they did, but because of the way the government works out and they had a very convincing story and some F shit was happening all the way around, I ain't gonna say who, but niggas and niggas only. Okay? But I think I tie all of that together because it made me really start thinking about the responsibility of the media and what the media's role is today. And the media is in a space where it's changing. The landscape is changing. We have content creators, we have commentators, we have people who receive news but also add nuance and add perspective to it. And because we have that, what the news is not the same anymore. Before, the news was very objective. Who, what, when, where, how did it happen? Now, there are people who added on to that, because that's the reason, like, I even started a podcast, was like, oh, the local news is not adding why things happen in my hometown the way they did. They're not being responsible with these stories. They're not doing the things that we're asking them to do. And so in that, it's really, really, really important that we understand that media is evolving, especially when social justice is involved, because social justice also requires perspective. It requires introspection. It requires us to also talk about the thing that happened, right? But it's hard to also do that and still remain quote unquote objective, because, oh, this is really tied to race. This is really tied to gender. This is really tied to a positive change that you want to see in the world. You have motivation, which means anything you talk about in social justice must remain persuasive. It must remain, you need to convince me to something because you have an agenda that you are trying to push, because you obviously cannot have a rational mind. You obviously cannot make a decision that is not steeped in your personal emotion, because race is so tied to your experience, because it's tied to pain, because of all of these things. So I'm thinking about the intersections of social justice and media, and how we have to navigate this new spectrum, this new world of what news can look like. Now, I'm still very much so into investigative journalism. I want to just hear the news for what it is, because I want to have the capability and the opportunity to just formulate my own opinion. That's really what I want the opportunity to present itself as. Now, because I want that, it's also understanding that as I have to have that ability to formulate my own opinion, we can also recognize that a lot of people are lazy consumers. People don't want to have to think for themselves, because if I think for myself, then that becomes, I got to do a lot of this work, and I got to rework the world that is around me. I got to rework how I interact with people. I have to be critical of the things that are in my spaces of comfort, because I don't want to have to deal with what this actually means. We're in a generation that, because we have this content coming and it's so digestible, and we're looking for the person that we like their opinion, and we hear what they have to say, and we agree with what they have to say, they don't actually want to have to think about, yo, actually, I agree with this for the most part, but I also disagree with this aspect. I never want to be in a space where people are just taking everything that I say at face value and don't have the ability to challenge it or push my thinking. I don't know everything. I'm not perfect. I'm always learning, right? But I think if we are no longer understanding the role of media and the objectivity that media is supposed to bring, sadly, Kyle Rittenhouse could have a case that will benefit him. It won't benefit black people, because at the end of the day, those ideas, those stereotypes, all of that can ultimately push against us. I think his media accountability project, he didn't have niggas in mind for that shit. He didn't. But he definitely had in mind, like, oh, the media did me dirty. I actually don't care about all these years that I saw it doing black people dirty. Because mind you, in a podcast interview he did not too long ago, he talked about, like, oh, well, yeah, black lives do matter. I do support this thing. I do want this thing. It was baseless virtue signaling at best. You lied. You're pathological. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And so it's so interesting to me when you think about the presumed innocence that white people get, the attack on critical race theory, the less harsh sentences that white people are getting after being violent towards black people. All of this stuff interacts together, and if we're not able to fully interrogate this thing, and how do we have to operate in this space, and what this could mean if he were to, in theory, win, we are in danger, because the media, I'm not saying historically it's ever helped black people, but at least media companies that had black people in mind and actually would want to make a positive change or cover the news in a way that's supposed to be covered, they're in danger. You know, we're in danger if we are going to have to even pussyfoot around what we want to say, how we have to make sure that black people are staying informed. We don't have a lot of reliable sources. We don't have a lot of media companies that are really going out there above and beyond for us. So what happens to us when a Kyle Rittenhouse is able to talk about what is considered a lie, what is considered the truth, who is to be held accountable, when are they to be held accountable, and will this extend into Black news organizations that are covering white supremacy, that are covering social justice, that are covering political movements, that are covering policy and how it impacts us? Are we getting any of that stuff? Because if that's the case, Black media is going to be in danger. And we have to think about that a little bit more. Be intentional about that stuff and really rethink a lot. So those are my thoughts when it comes to Kyle Rittenhouse and his media accountability project, but also how does this particularly hurt niggas in a way that I'm nervous about in the future. So let me know your thoughts below. What are you thinking about? What is your reaction when you saw something like this? Do you think it's just baseless? Is it something that we should be worried about? I don't know, but it doesn't sit well in my gut. So once again, this is your boy Keith, This American Negro. Thank you for tuning in again. I hope to see you next time. Peace.